Go on and prop that phone up for me. Join me for our 1 minute plank. It begins in 3, 2, 1. All right, guys, for today's Yap discussion, we're going to be discussing a murder case with a major plot twist. This is a true story from New York between 1973 to 1975, and is one of the darkest moral choices ever documented in American law. The man at the center, his name was Robert Garrow. Garrow was a Vietnam veteran. He was violent, manipulative, and later diagnosed as a sociopath. In 1973, he was arrested in New York for murder, and his defense attorneys were Frank H. Armani and Francis B. Now, these were fully accredited lawyers. They were not shady. Frank Armani was deeply religious and known as ethical. Meanwhile, Francis B. was a former prosecutor and was highly respected. If you were joining me for the 1 minute plank, our plank ends in 3, 2, 1. All right, let's continue. During a private legal protected meeting in 1973, Garrow told them something that was much worse than the crime that he was charged with. He said, and I quote, "I've killed girls," and he said the families are still looking for them. And then he said, quote, "I can show you where the bodies are buried." The lawyers did not call the police. They followed him. They drove into upstate New York, into the mountains, and then they walked into the woods, where they found the remains of the 2 young missing girls. The women exactly where Garrow said he had placed them. At that moment, Armani and Francis were trapped. Now they have a dilemma, because on one hand, if they told the police, the families would finally know the truth, the victims could be buried properly, and the parents could stop searching and have a peace of mind. However, on the other hand, if they spoke, they would violate attorney-client privileges, one of the oldest rules in law, and that rule also allows even the guilty person to speak honestly to their lawyers without fear of being turned in. If you were joining me still, our 2 minute plank is over now. Let's continue. Not only would it discredit the lawyer, but then no future client will have trust within that lawyer to be able to tell them the truth without being turned in. And so their fear was this: if the lawyers can betray confidentiality once, even for murder, then the guilty person will never confess again, and the judicial system will collapse, and we will not have a proper justice system. So there were only 2 options: break the law and give the families closure, or obey the law and leave the bodies where they were. But by coming clean and confessing that their client confessed to knowing where the bodies were and that he was the killer, will also mean that they are breaking the law by telling on him, and they will also receive a sentence or punishment of some sort. If you are still joining me for our plank, our 3 minute plank is over in 3, 2, 1. Let's continue. So Francis and Armani chose silence. They did not tell the police. They did not tell the families. They said nothing. When the media got wind of this and discovered what happened, the public was outraged. One victim's father said, "They buried my daughter twice." In 1975, the lawyers were criminally charged. Question before the court was simple yet horrifying. Is a lawyer a criminal for keeping a secret that the law requires them to keep, even when that secret involves murdered children? However, the law protected them, and so the judge ruled in their favor. All right, love you guys. Bye.